And I notice some of them are applauding themselves, and that's very worthy too. Well, let the ceremony begin. We are gathered on this shrine forecourt, which is a sacred place and has been declared so, for a most important ceremony in the life of this nation. The Battle for Australia 1941 to 1945 commemoration ceremony. The battle that helped to keep our nation free, with a focus this year, as I mentioned, on the outstanding efforts of our First Nations people. Following a war, most are remembered for serving on the battlefronts. But in fact, maintaining a war effort requires many hands, including those who work in various capacities, supplying the troops who take the front line. So those who remain home and work for the war effort should not be forgotten either. Squadron Leader Rebecca Heron is today's host as a Shrine Governor for today's ceremony, and it's a pleasure to ask her to say a few words about the significance of what we commemorate today and where we are. Squadron Leader Heron.
Good morning. I am Beck Heron, Shrine Governor, and on behalf of the trustees, welcome to the Shrine of Remembrance. We acknowledge the Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation, the traditional custodians of the land on which the shrine stands, and pay our respects to their elders, past and present. As a place of remembrance and storytelling, we honour their deep connection to country and waterways, shaped by generations of stories and memories. And thank you, Paul, for reminding us that Indigenous people did serve in the Defence Force alongside us. This Shrine of Remembrance was dedicated in 1934 to those Victorians and Australians who enlisted and served in the First World War. Our purpose now is to honour the service and sacrifice of all Victorians and Australians in war, conflict, peacemaking and peacekeeping. We warmly welcome all veterans and members of the Australian Defence Force and our allied forces, and the families that love and support them. We're here today to learn about and commemorate the battle for Australia. I'll now hand back the mic to our MC, Paul Sheeran.
And thank you very much indeed, Beck. That building was constructed on the basis of public subscription, would you believe? The people of Australia were so grateful for the effort of our armed forces that they gave remarkably generously, and it stands proudly nearly 100 years later. Now the Guard, the Honour Guard, under the command of Cadet Warrant Officer Maggie Fleming, will march on in preparation for the General Salute. I now ask you all to stand while our special guest, Brigadier Holloway, our three patrons, and the chair of our Battle for Australia Foundation, Lieutenant Colonel David Arden, take the general salute. And you may be seated. At this point, I take an opportunity of offering a special welcome to our chaplain for today, Chaplain Brendan Quirk. He's the coordinating chaplain of Joint Training Command, and he will begin our ceremony with a prayer. Chaplain Quirk.
Conscious that we are people from many faiths and backgrounds, and some with no faith. So let's just take this opportunity, irrespective of our faith, to just pause and reflect and think of the higher power perhaps, and using these words that we've written to focus our thoughts and love on those who have served. Holy and eternal God, be with us this day and send your Spirit into our hearts as we gather to remember and pay tribute to all who have served our nation in times of peace and war. We call to mind especially those from our First Nations peoples who have served and all who fought in the battle for Australia. May we never forget our allies who stood with us against our foes, and to those allies whom we supported and fought alongside against tyranny and oppression. And as we remember them all, let us recall also their families and friends who lived with the fear, anxiety, heartache and grief that war and conflict brings. We commend them all to your mercy, and following their example, ask for the grace to serve our nation with hope and steadfast resolve. Amen.
Thank you, Chaplain. The Guard of Honour now will march off. We now come to a particularly poignant part of the service. 4 students play the parts of actual participants in the battle for Australia and will make short presentations from scripts expertly prepared by Squadron Leader Peter Meehan that recall the contributions of our First Nations people. Now, you'll find those scripts towards the back of your order of service, and I think they begin on page 7. And this is the point at which I want you to suspend belief, you students, and just imagine that you are the person being talked about. So let's hear about Aboriginal enlistments in the forces from Mitchell Legrand, a Year 11 student at Highvale Secondary College. Mitchell.
Pacific War, Indigenous enlistments. In 1941, the battle for Australia intensified after Japanese imperial forces ravaged their way through Southeast Asia. The Pacific War had arrived on New Guinea, nearby island groups, and on Australia's doorstep with attacks on our mainland, along with the threat of occupation. Before 1941, Australian Defence Force enlistment was predominantly Australia's national volunteer citizens. However, the pace of the battle for Australia changed the enlistment rules. Between 3,000 and 7,000 Aboriginal men and women and Torres Strait Islanders served in the Australian Armed Forces and support units during World War II, including the Pacific War to Australia's north. The 7th Military District Northern Territory took on hundreds of Indigenous armed members. Others formed labour groups, bringing urgent logistical capability to Australian forces. Many Aboriginal service personnel made their mark with distinction, including Reg Saunders, the first Aboriginal to be commissioned as an officer in 1944. More on the achievements of Reg Saunders shortly.
Thank you very much indeed, Mitchell. Now to speak as the first Aboriginal pilot commissioned in the war, we welcome Milne Bay, another Year 11 student at High Vale Secondary College. Milne.
First Aboriginal pilot commissioned. Long before World War II and the battle for Australia, many in Australia's Aboriginal population served in the defence of Australia and the Commonwealth during World War I, 1914 to 1918. Reg Saunders, the first Aboriginal to be commissioned as an officer during World War II, was the son of a World War I veteran. Soldier Reg Saunders served World War II, Battle for Australia. Soldier Reg Saunders served with the 2nd and 7th Battalion in the Middle East, Crete, North Africa, Greece, and Wewak, New Guinea, where he served as a platoon commander. After World War II, the dedicated soldier served as a captain with 3rd Battalion, Royal Australian Regiment in the Korean War. Another standout Aboriginal serviceman amongst many was Len Waters, first and only Aboriginal fighter pilot to fly 95 missions in Kitty Hawk fighter aircraft with No. 7 Squadron, Royal Australian Air Force. Others include Pilot Officer David Paul, one of the few Indigenous pilots to fly under the Empire Air Training Scheme in Canada. Special mention, Flight Sergeant Arnold Loika, an Aboriginal prisoner of war, tragically died in Indonesia while in captivity.
And well done, Milan. Were you flying those planes? I hope so. A 3rd Year 11 student from High Vale Secondary College is Carla Staby, and she recounts the excellent Aboriginal work on enemy surveillance. Carla.
Aboriginal Eyes on Enemy Surveillance. Aboriginal specialist Kath Walker enlisted as an Australian Women's Army Service wireless operator stationed in Darwin. Her world of electronic communications was critical to the war effort. I recall the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples who played a vital frontline role during the Battle for Australia coastal surveillance, utilising deep country knowledge through specialised units like the Northern Territory Special Reconnaissance Unit and the Torres Strait Light Infantry Battalion. Groups from Arnhem Land monitored island coastal areas for Japanese air and sea movements. Another valuable service, the North Australia Observer Unit known as the Nakaroos, with mounted and foot reconnaissance units with more than 500 personnel led by Indigenous guides across vast areas of land to watch and report enemy landings. Tiwi Islanders on Melville Island acted as coastal watch for Royal Australian Navy, tracking enemy aircraft and famously capturing the first Japanese prisoner of war on Australian soil. Darwin's Black Watch, Larrakia, and other Aboriginal men also conducted coastal tracking, including surveillance and survival rescues of downed Allied pilots.
Thank you, Carla, and exceedingly well read. What an extraordinary story. Some of you might have read Kath Walker's poetry from time to time. She became Oodgeroo Noonuccal, if my memory serves me correctly, reverting to her First Nations name. So, Carla, thank you for that reminder. And finally, to speak about the effect of enemy attacks on mainland, we will hear from Nisanu Dahanak Gadara, a Year 9 Lakeside College student. Nisanu.
1942, 84 years ago, war in the southwest Pacific, Australia under attack. Threat of occupation, it is the battle for Australia. 97 bombing raids ranging from Exmouth, Western Australia to Townsville, Queensland between February 1942 and July 1944. Deaths of 279 people with another 428 wounded, in addition to aircraft and shipping losses. Japanese and German submarines and surface raiders sank 53 merchant ships, including the Australian hospital ship Centaur and 3 warships. Deaths of 1,751 Australian and Allied services personnel and civilians. Japanese reconnaissance flights were conducted over Sydney, Melbourne, Hobart, Wellington, and Auckland in New Zealand. And a Japanese reconnaissance mission penetrated 45 kilometers inland from the Kimberley coast, Western Australia, in 1944. Events that struck fear into the hearts of the Australian civilian population, the bombing of Darwin, the submarine attacks on Sydney Harbour, the shelling of Newcastle steelworks, and the threat of Australia being occupied by a foreign power. Coral Sea battles raged on. In New Guinea, the Hawthorne-based 39th Battalion with support units conducted deadly battles on the Kokoda Trail. Australian and Japanese losses were significant. However, Australia's battle success on the Kokoda Trail led to the Japanese being denied occupation of Port Moresby, New Guinea, and the annex of Australia, which would have cut off supply to Australia.
Thank you. Very well done. Well, 4 very moving reminders of how close action was to this country, and it's easy to forget that there were actually episodes that involved our actual land here. Extraordinary. So to the 4 speakers, thank you very much indeed for those moving reminders, and it's now my pleasure to ask the patrons and Mrs. Bedgegood, if she's here, to make a small presentation to Mitchell, Milan, Carla and Nisanu for their efforts. So follow them over. And they did wonderfully well. Let's give them a round of applause. Now, one of the things that sustained our troops as they prepared for battle was a sense of togetherness, and that was particularly strong for Australian forces, a feeling that they were not alone in this great battle. So let's try, at least in part, to recreate that feeling of mateship and teamwork by joining in the choruses of I Am, You Are, We Are Australian, which is a fairly well-known song. We're going to be led by the Royal Australian Navy Band, conducted by Chief Petty Officer Brett Donovan and vocalist leading seaman James. You'll find the words printed in your orders of service on page 2, but a word of advice. We, the audience, join in the choruses only the choruses. But please, when you sing with gusto, sing as though you mean it and that you want to really be part of the team. And I'm sure the troops from World War II would have wanted you to do that. Well, that was a rousing version. And I might have given Brett Donovan some accolade there that he wasn't deserving. It was Lieutenant Commander Nathaniel Maxwell who was conducting the band. But anyway, whatever, it was a splendid rendition of that wonderful song. Lieutenant Colonel Associate Professor Joe West is a Murrawarri warrior from the Colgoa River region in New South Wales, now based at the University of Melbourne. His particular interest and research interest particularly is in machine learning and artificial intelligence, and what could be more pertinent than that as it fast establishes itself as a way of the future. And whether we like it or not, we need to learn with it and to use it to our benefit. Much of his work, as I understand it, will have a very positive application in rehabilitating humans, particularly with birth defects and those with acquired brain injuries of one sort or another. He's generously agreed to come and speak today particularly about the First Nations' involvement in World War II, and it's my pleasure and privilege now to ask him to speak to us. Lieutenant Colonel West.
Thank you. It is an absolute honour to be here and to see so many bright eyes and interest in this service. I served for more than 21 years in the regular army, and I've continued to serve as a reservist ever since, totalling in approximately 33 years of service. My current job is as the Staff Officer for First Nations Australians in Army Headquarters, and I'm here also as the Chief Executive Officer of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Veterans Association. First off, I want to say a big thank you to Mitchell, Milan, Carla and Nasinu for your amazing talks today. They were very rousing and touched close to home. And I'll talk today a little about some of those people that they spoke about. But I also want you to know that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people number in the excess of 3,000 people across service in World War I and World War II. There is an estimated 15,000 Indigenous veterans currently alive today in Australia. The battle for Australia was not one single battle, and it was not fought overseas. As we heard, Darwin was bombed, Japanese submarines entered Sydney Harbour, Australians fought at sea, in the air and through the islands and jungles to our north. And here in Australia, people watched the coastline and prepared for the possibilities that war might reach our shores, and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples were a critical part of that defence. One of the clearest examples, as we've heard, is in the Northern Australia. As military planners prepared for the possibility of Japanese invasion, it was quickly realised that Australian coastlines were too big to defend with our conventional forces. So they turned to Aboriginal people in Northern Australia. Squadron leader Donald Thompson, who was also a reservist at the University of Melbourne, joined with Yolngu Elder Ray Waller Miljingi to raise the Northern Territory Specialist Reconnaissance Unit, the NTSRU. At the time, the clans in the north were feuding with each other, and in order to end that feud, some of them walked more than 100 kilometres to a ceremonial site at Trial Bay, and they had to conduct a peacemaking ceremony, which was ancient and private, called a makarata. They made peace through that ceremony, and after they made peace, more than 51 Yolngu men from Arnhem Land, together with Pacific and Torres Strait Islander members and a small number of non-Indigenous soldiers, enlisted into the NTSRU to defend Australia. Their job was to patrol remote coastlines, watch for enemy activity, and if the Japanese landed, help defend Northern Australia by whatever means possible. And the Yolngu men, already traditional warriors, were ready to go. They already had the knowledges and skills that were needed. They knew the land and the coastlines, they knew how to move across the country, find food and water, observe without being seen, and survive in places where most soldiers would struggle. The plan was that they would use boomerangs and spears and the equipment they already had. Indigenous knowledge and Indigenous warrior culture was a critical part of defence of Australia at this time. Further north, other Indigenous Australians were fighting the Japanese directly. Two of them were best mates, Privates George Leonard and Private Harold West, my two uncles. George and Harold were Murawari men from Gaduga in the northwest New South Wales. They grew up together, worked together, and in August 1941 enlisted in the Australian Army together. They were posted to the 2nd 1st Australian Infantry Battalion and eventually were sent to Papua New Guinea. The conditions were terrible: steep mountains, thick jungle, heavy rain, mud, disease, and an enemy that could be only metres away without being seen. George and Harold had grown up hunting, tracking and living on the land. Once again, those skills became military skills. In October 1942, they were fighting around Eora Creek on the Kokoda Track, and on the 23rd of October, George Leonard was killed. He was 32 years old. Harold had lost his best mate and his cousin, but he kept fighting. And in the days that followed, Harold used his tracking and bush skills to move through the jungle and attack the Japanese positions. The War Memorial records that he would sometimes leave his unit and disappear into the jungle, searching for enemy machine gun posts using his traditional knowledges. His courage became known well beyond his own unit. His story was reported in newspapers at the time, and a fellow soldier, Sapper Bert Barros, wrote a poem inspired by him called The Coloured Digger. Harold did not make it home either. He broke his leg during one of his missions and was evacuated to hospital in Port Moresby and died on the 29th of November 1942. He was 31. Uncle George and Uncle Harold had enlisted together, served together, and just over a month apart, gave their lives defending Australia. The third man to talk about, since we're here in Victoria, is Reg Saunders. Reg was a Gunditjmara man from Western Victoria, enlisted in 1940 and fought in North Africa, Greece and Crete. And when Allied forces withdrew from Crete, Reg was left behind. For almost a year, he avoided capture before escaping and returning back to Australia. And then he went back to war, this time against the Japanese in New Guinea. Reg became a sergeant and established himself as an outstanding soldier and leader. And in 1944, his commanding officer nominated him to become an officer. Reg returned to Victoria and completed the course at Seymour to our north here, and in November 1944, he was commissioned as a lieutenant, becoming the first identified Aboriginal Australian officer in the Army. Then he returned to New Guinea and commanded a platoon of Australian soldiers in battle. These stories show us physical courage, the courage to patrol an isolated coastline when invasion seemed possible, the courage to move through the jungle looking at the enemy machine gun despite the danger, and the courage to lead soldiers in battle. But there's also another kind of courage, moral courage. And this is where these stories become more than a war. At the time these men were serving, Aboriginal Australians were not treated equally here in Australia. There were restrictions on enlistment and many parts of everyday life. The Yolngu members from the Northern Territory Specialist Reconnaissance Unit were not even paid wages in the same ways that other soldiers were at the time. And yet, in the Army, something different could happen. When people train together, live together and fight together, they learn very quickly who they can rely on. When your life depends on the person beside you, what matters most is that they can do their job and whether they will stand their ground, whether they will look after their mates and whether they can lead, not the colour of their skin. George, Harold and Reg all proved themselves, and non-Indigenous soldiers and officers also recognised it. Many of Harold's mates argued for his recognition vocally in the public media. Reg's commanding officer was prepared to say this Aboriginal man should become an officer and lead Australian soldiers. And that matters, because when Indigenous servicemen came home, the equality many had experienced during service did not come home with them. They returned to discrimination. Veterans were barred from service clubs, but some non-Indigenous soldiers stood up on their behalf of their mates. And after the war, the returned servicemen joined Indigenous Australians in arguing for greater rights, including the right to vote. The war ended and the struggle continued, but no longer a struggle with rifles, aircraft or ships, a struggle about what Australia was going to be. And while the battlefield demanded physical courage, our soldiers back at home showed further moral courage, prepared to say that the man beside them that was equal in battle should also be equal back at home. So today, when we commemorate the battle for Australia, I want to remember more than our battles. We want to remember those Yolngu men who watched the northern coastlines, remember George Leonard, remember Harold West, remember Leonard Walters, remember Arnold Lockyer, remember Reg Saunders, remember Kath Walker, and remember their courage. And also remember those mates who stood beside them, showing physical and moral courage. They all helped defend Australia. And their service also helped challenge Australia to become better, a country worthy of all the people And for the young people today, I'm very proud that you're here and sharing this service with me, lest we forget.
Well, that's a very salutary reminder of, both the sadness of war and the agony that it must have provided for many parents whose children didn't ever come home, but also a reminder of the devastation that war can wreak. And you have to ask yourself the question, if the call came, would you be happy to answer it? Would you be happy to drop everything and go off to a different country and fight? I'm not sure the answer these days would be yes from everyone. And I guess one of the messages that came through very clearly for me, sir, was it was a reminder that we all should be thinking about what could be in this country, not what is, what could be. So thank you very much indeed for that very poignant address. We come now to the commemorative aspects of our program, and for this the catafalque party will take their post around the eternal flame. Now, the catafalque party has been coordinated by Ms. Beck Anthony. They'll take their post around this World War II memorial, supported by drummers of the Shrine Guard, and they'll be under the command of Protective Services Officer Sergeant Panjak Kashyap. And I ask them now to take their post. A catafalque party is a guard that traditionally accompanies the coffin of a distinguished person as they are borne to the graveside or as they lie in state. Legend has it that the first catafalque parties guarded important and wealthy people's coffins from thieves and vandals, would you believe it? and the Cadet Guard of Honour has also resumed its post. I now ask the chaplain to lead us in prayer again.
Creator God, giver of life, source of hope and healing, we bring before you and remember all who have lived lives in service of others, especially those who gave their lives in defence of their country. Most especially, today we remember with grateful hearts and minds all the men and women who took part in the battle for Australia, that we and future generations might live in peace and freedom. And so we remember those servicemen and women who enlisted and fought in the front lines at sea, on land, in the air, and in the rear echelons of support, as well as those civilians who served in the Merchant Navy and those who remained at home making daily sacrifices, supporting the war effort and putting aside their own needs. As we remember their generosity of spirit, their sacrifice, their courage, their devotion to duty, and their example of serving a cause greater than themselves, may we give thanks for the legacy we inherit and which came at so great a cost, not simply in words, but by following their example. We make this prayer with deep gratitude in our hearts. Amen.
Thank you, Chaplain. It's now time to lay the wreaths, and I ask those who are laying wreaths to come forward to present their floral tributes. The gift of flowers at a memorial site is a ritual that occurs around the world and is understood in every culture. Those flowers convey both the beauty and the brevity of life. Now, the laying of wreaths here today will be done in groups and accompanied by music from the Air Force Band. And the first group will be our guest of honour, the three patrons and our chairman, as well as our guest speaker. And now our Shrine Governor and representative of the Minister for Veterans Affairs. The Royal Australian Navy and the Royal Australian Air Force, Captain Ben Esler and Group Captain Ben Graves. Representative of the two consulates with our chaplain, the United States, James Clarkson, and Captain Geordie Balasat from New Zealand, and Chaplain Quirk. The cadets, both Navy and Air Force, from Training Ship Bataan and the Monash Barracks at Dandenong. And they'll be followed by representatives of the schools who are laying wreaths. And the schools again are Aitken College, Alfredton Primary School, Balan Primary School, Caranballock College, Christchurch Grammar School, Craigieburn South Primary School, Gladstone Park Secondary College, Glen Waverley Secondary College, Goonawarra Primary School, Highvale Secondary College, Lakeside College Pakenham, Lumen Christi Catholic Primary School, Magpie Primary School, Mary Immaculate Primary School, Parkdale Secondary College, Patterson River Secondary College, St Michael's Primary School, Star of the Sea College, Taylor's Lakes Primary School, Wallen Secondary College, and Wodi Yallock Primary School. And Colonel Daniel Strack, Army Career Management, accompanied by Lieutenant Colonel Peter Reardon. Colonel Stack is basically in charge of human relations for the entire Army, and Lieutenant Colonel Reardon is in charge of the Army Cadet Brigade across Victoria. Next come the Defence Reserves Association and the Darwin Defenders. Then the RSL Victoria, Waverley RSL, the South African Military Veterans Organisation of Australasia, and the Department of Veterans Affairs Victoria with Bomber Command. And if there are any members of the public wishing to lay a floral tribute, you may do so now. We now come to a collection of commemorations that are extremely important in a ceremony like this, and I will ask our guest of honour, Brigadier Holloway, to come forward for the ode, the last post, the silence following the last post, the lest we forget at the end of the silence, the reveille, and then the national anthem, which we will all sing together. Would you all please stand as Brigadier Holloway reads the ode?
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them. lest we forget.
Please remain standing as the catafalque party move away. I now ask Chaplain Quirk to pronounce the blessing.
Friends, go forth into the world in peace. Be of good courage, hold fast to that which is good, and render to no one evil for evil. Strengthen the faint-hearted, support the weak, help the afflicted, give honour to all. Love and serve the common good, rejoicing in the presence of a power greater than ourselves. And may the blessing of God be among you and remain with you always. Amen.
Well, thank you, Chaplain. You may sit. Our special guest, Brigadier Holloway, will again take the General Salute from the Air Force and Navy Cadet Guard of Honour, and the Navy Band will play as he departs. And we thank him very, very much indeed for being with us today. The Guard of Honour will now march off. And I think as they do, it would be nice for us to show our appreciation to them, and particularly to the band for their outstanding performances at this ceremony this morning. And they look an absolute picture, don't they? Under the command of Cadet Warrant Officer Maggie Fleming. Very, very well done. Well, they did a damn sight better than I did 60 years ago as a cadet in the school cadet force. They're exceedingly well presented and beautifully trained. Thank them very much indeed. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that includes our ceremony to honour the battle for Australia in the Second World War, and particularly the First Nations' contribution to that effort. Thank you all very much indeed for attending. And on your behalf, I offer a special thank you to our guest of honour, Brigadier Holloway, again, and also to our guest speaker, Lieutenant Colonel Joe West, for his marvellous address and how pertinent it was and close to his family, the words that he said. And they ought to be a reminder to us all that we need to make sure we let those people who are close to us know that we love them, because you just never know what might be around the corner. I recall going to the Australian War Cemetery in the Somme at Villas Bretonner. There were 2 headstones there of brothers from Sydney. One was aged 24 and a captain, the other 21 and a lieutenant. Both died on the Somme. How tragic. At that age, fit, athletic young men torn away from their families. So thank you all very much for attending, and thank you very much indeed to the 4 speakers, Mitchell, Milan, Carla and Nisanu. They read splendidly too and added a particularly important aspect to the service. To our 3 patrons, thank you to them for sparing the time to be with us today too. Shrine Governor Squadron Leader Heron, and CEO Karen Ellis were both here. The Royal Australian Navy Band were outstanding yet again. Did we expect anything less? No, I don't think so. And leading seaman James and able seaman Glasson again played their parts beautifully. The Air Force and Navy Guard of Honour under Cadet Warrant Officer Maggie Fleming, Chaplain Quirk, the Catafalque Party under the command of Protective Services Officer Sergeant Panjak Kashyap, the teachers and students from the schools represented, and our many invited guests, especially Mrs. Sally Bedgegood and members of the Ted Lyons family. Many people contribute to bringing this service together, and it's an outstanding performance that we are privileged to witness. So thank you to my colleagues on the Battle for Australia Foundation for working so hard to pull this service together. I hope that you've all found it a meaningful experience. Thank you very, very much for being with us.